realization, Bhaktisiddhanta's translation is realization manifests. So one sadhu may have this realization, another sadhu may have that realization, and so forth. An example that I just came across this afternoon was having to do with Ramayana. There were two personalities in Ram's entourage that were the sons of the Ashvini Kumaras. And they were Minda and Dvivida. Aminda and Dvivida. So one set of acharyas says Minda and Dvivida are their Nitya Siddha personalities in Ram's entourage in Vaikuntha. Nitya Siddha personalities in Ram's entourage in Ayodhya, in Vaikuntha. And when Ram appears in this world, there are living entities who are the sons of Ashvini Kumaras, and they bear the same name, Minda and Dvivida. And Minda and Dvivida, they bear some of the Shaktis of the Nitya Siddhas. At the same time, they're Jivas, and Jivas are Jivas, they're Tatastha Shakti. It's possible, there's a potential for Jivas to become covered. And in this particular case, the Jivas that become covered due to an offense to Lakshmana. Now, so far, I sent a little message asking the researchers that know Ramayana inside and out, where is it? Because I couldn't find it. What was the offense to Lakshmana? So don't ask me what was the offense was, because the answer is I don't know. But they, Dvivida and Minda, specifically Dvivida, was proud of his power. He was very powerful. In the battle in Lanka, in Yuddhakanda, Dvivida directly fights Kumbhakarna. So he wasn't a small timer. He was a powerful fighter, and list of other personalities who he fought with. He was very powerful. Somehow, somewhere along the line, he was proud of his power and made some kind of offense, not unspecified, but some kind of offense. And when you make an offense, what happens? Something arises in the heart. Something unwanted arises in the heart, called an anartha. And due to that anartha, although he was a Shaktivesh avatar, according to this description, he then fell prey to bad association. He, like Jambavan, was present during, Dvivida was present during Ram's pastimes, as was Jambavan. And Dvivida was present during Krishna's pastimes. Dvivida, although he was a great devotee and a lieutenant under the care of Sugriva as one of the Vanaras, and etc., he fell prey to bad association. During Krishna's pastimes, the bad association from him was Narakasura. Narakasura was a rotten apple. Rotten apple. You know the example, you've heard the expression, if you have a barrel of apples and one rotten apple in the barrel of apples, it spoils all the apples. You've heard that one? So Narakasura was the rotten apple. Who else did Narakasura become bad association for? With bad association, Narakasura. So through bad association, when Krishna killed Narakasura, who had imprisoned 16,100 princesses, and then Krishna married them all, by Krishna's killing Narakasura, Dvidvita wanted to get even, the get back mentality. So he did bad things. There's a whole list of bad things that he did. And Balaram is the one who killed him. But Balaram was going light with him because during that same lifetime previously, he was a great devotee. But he did some bad stuff with Balaram. And so he finished him. And he gave him liberation. Now, that's one set of acharyas describing Dvidvita's history. Jiva Goswami, on the other hand, makes a different assessment. These are contemporary acharyas saying, like Jai and Vijay were cursed, so these two, Minda and Dvidvita, they, through bad association, they became susceptible for the Lord to teach a lesson, as it was to teach the lesson with Jai and Vijay. So here we have, what are you going to do when you have our great acharyas having different points of view? You could say, well, if this is right, then that's wrong. And if that's right, then this is wrong. You could get stuck. We don't do that. They have the realizations. They're not creative writers writing a comic book. They're giving their realizations about the situation. And it can be the same, different days of Brahma kind of situation. And without specifying that this is this day and that's that day of Brahma, without specifying what I just read. Before I started reading different Ramayanas, all I knew was Srimad Bhagavatam. And then I started finding out that there's other Ramayanas that say other things. Here, it's by his glance of anger, the ocean began to boil. But there are other versions of Ramayana that show Ram shooting and saying, they're paintings that show it. He shot an arrow, and with the arrow entering into the ocean began to boil. So then you can go, is it this or is it that? If it's this, how can it be that? If it's that, how can it be this? Different days of Brahma. Whew. And that's a standard, as long as one has authoritative sources and not speculative sources, but authoritative sources, that's how to understand those differences. Now, how long did it take to cook rice? Those of you that cook rice at home. And it depends on how many people you're cooking for. Let's say the Sunday feast. There was a time when it was a standard for our Sunday feasts that Prabhupada had established, that we had to have sweet rice. I mean, like, it wasn't a rule, but it was what we did. We had sweet rice. So because Sunday generally comes after Saturday, and Saturday everyone went on Sankirtan, and I was the only person left in the temple because everybody went on Sankirtan. I was the Sankirtan leader. So I was given the assignment to cook the sweet rice and then to boil the milk, and then, to keep the rice from caking on the bottom of the pot. I learned how to make sweet rice, and then because it has to cool overnight, and then you put it in the walk-in refrigerator, it gets cold in time for the Sunday feast. Take a long time to boil the milk, what to speak of make sweet rice. So to boil the ocean, a lot of heat. And it was just his glance. So how powerful is the Lord's glance? Who can say? It's incredibly powerful. And with his glance, he does so many things. One of the nice sections in the first canto Bhagavatam is when Krishna is entering Dwaraka, the shy ladies would be situated on top of roofs so they would see Krishna from a distance. And Krishna would see them standing on the rooftops, and he would glance at them, and it's described just by his glancing at them. He entered their eyes and then entered their hearts. In their hearts, they embraced him, and they felt as satisfied as if they had embraced Krishna. Very beautiful. But that's how powerful his glance. Or we often hear it later in the Bhagavatam about his sidelong glances with the gopis. And like zap. It wasn't just, boy girls thing. It was it transcendental potency. And as we know, with any one of his senses, it's interchangeable with any of the other senses. So he can eat with his eyes. He can, his eyes are very special. So in the Bhagavatam, he boiled the ocean with his glance of anger. And the aquatics started to scream. Like, can somebody help me out with this? Because it's not at all uncommon to read that amongst the aquatics in the ocean, the Bhagavatam lists crocodiles. Now, I had the impression that crocodiles live in much smaller bodies of water, like ponds and lakes and rivers. So are there crocodiles in the ocean?
In breeding season, they go to the ocean for like 4 or 5 months or something like that because they like salt water.
Where'd you read that? Huh?
I just know a lot about animals.
You know a lot about animals. So where'd you learn that about animals?
Well, mostly the internet, but
On the internet. Anybody heard that one before?
I used to watch, in my college days, I used to watch a lot of Discovery Channel and many animals, but there are certain crocodiles, not all, that live in the ocean also. But I don't know that detail which he just mentioned. But I know in those Discovery channels that there are
The crocodiles, there are some.
yeah,
there are some, not all.
the Nile crocodile lives in bigger ones.
Okay. That's just a detail. It's very common, crocodiles in the ocean. in the Bhagavatam. A certain species. Well, Samudra, let's see what the I'm looking for the word that says who the ocean. It just says the ocean. Sindhu. Bayagirna Gosha, with whose loud sound was silenced through fear. Anyway, he's going to speak. The personified ocean is going to speak. Oh, all-pervading Supreme Person, we are dull-minded and did not understand who you are. But now we understand that you are the Supreme Person, the master of the entire universe, the unchanging and original personality of Godhead. The demigods are infatuated with the mode of goodness, the Prajapatis with the mode of passion, and the Lord of the ghosts with the mode of ignorance. But you are the master of all these qualities. And here's a purport. The word jada, dia, refers to intelligence like that of an animal. A person with such intelligence, personality of Godhead, without being beaten, an animal cannot understand the purpose of a man. Similarly, those who are dull-minded cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but when punished severely by the modes of material nature, they begin to understand him. A Hindi poet has said, Dukha se sabha hari bhaje, sukha se bhaje koi. Sukha se agar hari bhaje, dukha katan se hai. When one is distressed, he goes to a church or temple to worship the Lord. But when opulent, he forgets the Lord. Therefore, punishment by the Lord through material nature is necessary in human society, for without it, men forget the supremacy of the Lord due to their dull, blunt intelligence. Next. My Lord, you may use my water as you like. Indeed, you may cross it and go to the abode of Ravana, who is the great source of disturbance and crying for the three worlds, which is the meaning of his name, Ravana. He is the son of Vishrava, a great Muni, great Rishi, but is condemned like urine. Please go kill him and thus regain your wife Sita Devi. O great hero, although my water presents no impediment to you for going to Lanka, please construct a bridge over it to spread your transcendental fame. Upon seeing this wonderfully uncommon deed of your lordship, all the great heroes and kings in the future will glorify you. Purport. It is said that a sun and urine emanate from the same source, the genitals. When a son is a devotee or a great learned person, the seminal discharge for begetting a son is successful. But if the son is unqualified and brings no glory to his family, he is no better than urine. Here, Ravana is compared to urine because he was a cause of disturbances to the three worlds. Thus, the ocean personified wanted him killed by Lord Ramacandra. Paragraph. One feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Ramacandra, is omnipotence. The Lord can act without regard to material impediments or inconveniences, but to prove that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and was not merely advertised as Godhead or elected by popular vote, he constructed a wonderful bridge over the ocean. Nowadays, it has been fashionable to create some artificial God who performs no uncommon activities, semicolon. A little magic will bewilder a foolish person into selecting an artificial God because he does not understand how powerful God is. Lord Ramacandra, however, constructed a bridge over the water with stone by making the stone float. This is proof of God's uncommonly wonderful power. Why should someone be accepted as God without displaying extraordinary power by doing something never to be done by any common man? We accept Lord Ramacandra as the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he constructed this bridge. And we accept Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he lifted Govardhan Hill when he was only 7 years old. We should not accept any rascal as God or an incarnation of God, for God displays special features in his activities. Therefore, the Lord himself says in Bhagavad Gita 4:9, Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo veti tatvataha Chakva deham purnar janma naitimameti sarjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. The activities of the Lord are not common. They are all transcendently wonderful and not able to be performed by any other living being. The symptoms of the Lord's activities are all mentioned in the Shastras, and after one understands them, he can accept the Lord as he is. We don't hear so much about how the Vanaras took it. That was Ramchandra the Supreme Personality of Godhead because look, he can float stones and make a bridge. We don't hear much discussion about how, did they regard Ram with divinity or how did they regard Ram? They regarded him as one they wanted to serve, that's for sure. And the degree to which they viewed him I can't recall much discussion. Must be somewhere in the commentary of the Acharyas. But largely the pastime of Ram for the people who were participating in his pastimes with him was he's the ideal king with ideal character and ideal filial love and ideal parental love and ideal in every way. And then there's some exceptions. Why did Ramchandra do certain things? Why did he, for example, why did he apparently make a mistake and go after the deer? Because it caused so much trouble, and not only to him, but for poor Sita. And if he's God, not if he's God, but he's God, so and therefore he's omniscient. So why did he do this? And sometimes it's, how can he be God if he did this? Then comes the Leela part. And in the Leela part, one doesn't see his divinity. The participants don't see his divinity. Lakshman didn't see his divinity. Lakshman was just subservient in absolute sense, a perfect sense, as was Hanuman. I can't recall of anything where Hanuman is describing in the pastimes. Later, in the Bhagavatam, he's speaking of Lord Ramacandra as the Supreme Personality of God, but during the pastimes, he is his master. So it's human-like. An emphasis is on human-like, but human-like where the character is ideal. He sacrifices everything for virtue, and that's how he lives his life. Everything is centered around that. So we read it in the midday session. I'll just touch on it again. Hanuman in the fifth canto Bhagavatam. Where does Hanuman reside? Kim Purusha Varsha. Where's Kim Purusha Varsha? Wait a minute. Don't mumble. I can't follow what you're saying.
Above Gandharva Loka.
Above where?
Gandharva Loka.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. In what's Jambudweep? Jambudweep is the central island in the landscape of Bhumandala. Bhumandala has a series of oceans and islands that are in ring-shaped oceans, ring-shaped islands, and Jambudweep is the central island. On top of Jambudweep is Mount Sumeru, right? The golden mountain, inverted mountain. And on top is the realm of the Digpals, the protectors of the universe. And then down is Jambudweep. And Jambudweep has a number of varshas, or tracts of land. And one of those varshas, or tracts of land on Jambudweep, is Kimpurusha Varsha. Kimpurusha Varsha is where Hanuman stays. After Ram returned with almost all of his associates, some remained behind, and Hanuman was the main one staying behind. And he, with other associates in Kimpurusha Varsha, they're constantly engaged in glorification of Ram and his pastimes. And there, Hanuman refers to Ramacandra as the personality of Godhead. And there he says, one of the prayers, chapter 19 of Canto 5, he says that Ram appeared for more than one reason. He appeared not only to kill the wicked Ravana, but he also wanted to teach through his own example a lesson to mankind. And the lesson is what we read in the afternoon session. And the lesson he wanted to teach, and it worked, he wanted to teach that one who has too much attachment for wife, then he'll have to undergo difficulty. And so he taught it. I've told the story many times, but it's a nice story. Starting in 1974, I think it was 1974. It might have been 73, 74. We started Prabhupada started a Mayapur Vrindavan festival. And at the time, the first year, there was no living accommodation, no proper living accommodation, no Western standard living accommodation for the devotees. All there was the one building where the deities were, and there were some facilities upstairs for guest rooms. But the devotees that came to the festival were sleeping in rooms that had no screens. So when you live in Mayapur and there's no screens, what happens? Lots of mosquitoes. And there was no bathing facility. So all that was there was pumps. And you were there for like 10 days. So everyone had a bucket, and they pumped water into the bucket, and then you dumped the water on your head. So the place became a big mud puddle. So we were walking through the mud puddle and pumping water into the bucket and dumping it on our head, and we walked back and we're all muddy from standing in the mud puddle. It was really interesting, and lots of mosquitoes, and devotees were getting malaria. It was a great time. So because of that experience, Prabhupada wanted then to have accommodations that Western people would feel okay with. So they built something for the next year. And when that next year happened, somewhere before Gaur Purnima, Prabhupada wanted 100 devotees to go with him, or some number, I think it was 100, to go by train from Calcutta to Hyderabad for a pandal. So I was selected to go, and I went. And when we got to Hyderabad, there was a man, a very popular name in Andhra is Reddy. I forget his name, but something Reddy. Pulla. Okay, am I saying it right?
Yes.
Pulla Reddy. Thank you. Pulla Reddy had donated some land to be used for a temple. And I found out later why he donated it. He donated it because it was adjacent to a place that right in downtown had been a graveyard. And nobody wanted to buy it. And he couldn't sell it. He owned it. And then he found out about it afterwards. So he donated to ISKCON. So what the devotees did is they did a big, whatever you call it, Bhuta Puja or something, to free the land from whatever, misfortune was there. So it was right downtown. It wasn't as built up as it is, but it was still built up at that time. And there was nothing. And so we set up tents to sleep in with lots of mosquitoes in the tents. And there were no toilets and no place to bathe. So it was the same, use a pump and bucket showers. And then the toilets were just a trench, like a latrine behind a straw wall. And that's what we did for a week. And then we had Mangal Arti somewhere on the property. And then we had, morning class. And we had breakfast. And then we went out on Sankirtan with giving out invitations for the Pandal program. And then in the afternoon, we went for lunch at different life members' homes. So one of the days, it was Pulla Reddy's turn to host us. So it was a really big estate, nicely landscaped and stuff. And the sannyasis and VIPs were inside, and the rest of us were outside. So I hurry up and finished my lunch. So, because I wanted to go inside and be with Prabhupada. Be twice as big as the space we're occupying right now, with really nice furniture. And over here was the lady of the house and her friends seated with her on a couch. And over here was Prabhupada and the sannyasi seated on the floor by Prabhupada. And she was asking, why did Ram make a mistake? And she was really stubborn about it. She asked it like 4 or 5 times. And Prabhupada said it wasn't a mistake. It was a pastime. And yeah, but the mistake of why didn't he's omniscient. How is it, being omniscient, that he went after the deer? Because when he went after the deer, look at the problems that came. And poor Sita, and look what he went through, and why did he make a mistake? Swamiji, why did he make a mistake? And then Prabhupada made this reference that's here, and from this midday's class, and from Hanuman's prayer, he wanted to teach if there's misery. He wanted to teach it. So he taught by his own example. And he went through a lot of misery, as did she. The lady didn't like it. And Prabhupada just looked at the sannyasis and smiled. They understood what was going on. She was giving him some trouble. So there's multiple purposes in his pastimes. And in his pastimes, it looks certainly like he was feeling the same kinds of emotion as a madly attached person. Now, during that period of time when he became angry at Lakshman, scolded him severely, Lakshman had to help lift his spirits up again and again. Let's not get despondent here, because our business is to find Sita. Let's go find Sita. And he kept realigning the sadness of Ram to the mission at hand, find Sita. At one point, he exhibited another kind of anger, where he vowed, we can't find Sita, I'll destroy the universe. I got my bow and I'll burn up the universe. He was expressing his divinity very clearly, expressing his divinity before Lakshman. But primarily his pastimes were not like that. It was an ideal person, very human-like, and therefore naturally very relatable, because very human-like. Still abiding by principles of good conduct. There's a really nice section where and Vali is slain, and he's lying there with an arrow in his chest, and he's looking at Ram, vilifying Ram. He gives like 9 different reasons of why what he did was wrong, and he should be condemned for doing this wrong thing. And one by one, by one, by one, by one, each one, Ram turns it around and explains why what he did was right, according to codes of Dharma, including, shooting at him from behind a tree. One of the reasons, the transcendental reasons given, which he didn't give to Vali, but one of the transcendental reasons of hiding behind a tree is he wanted to uphold the benediction given by Indra that this special pendant and necklace that he was wearing, as long as he was wearing it, they had the power of taking half of the strength from the opponent in battle, plus his own power. So he would always defeat his opponent. So if Ram fought him in straight-on combat, Indra's pledge or Indra's benediction would have been broken. He wanted to uphold the words of Indra and his devotees, his demigod assistants, and so he did it that way. But there's also another code of Dharma by which it was perfectly appropriate that he did what he did, the way that he did. Anyway, there's so many lessons in Ramayana. I'll just read one more verse. Let's see what happens. Shukadeva Goswami said, after constructing a bridge over the ocean by throwing into the water the peaks of mountains whose trees and other vegetation had been shaken by the hands of great monkeys, Lord Ramachandra, with the direction and help of Vibhishana, Ravana's brother, the Lord, along with the monkey soldiers, headed by Sugriva, Nila, and Hanuman, entered Ravana's kingdom, Lanka, which had previously been burnt by Hanuman. Purport. Great mountain peaks, covered with trees and plants, were thrown into the sea by the monkey soldiers and began to float by the supreme will of the Lord. Now, there's one of the versions of Ramayana is they wrote Ram's name on it, and that therefore it floated, or the rocks floated. But here it's just by the will of the Lord. By the supreme will of the Lord, many great planets float weightlessly in space like swabs of cotton. If this is possible, why should great mountain peaks not be able to float on water? This is the omnipotence of the Supreme, because he is not under the control of the material nature, semicolon. Indeed, material nature is controlled by him. Maya Dyakshina Prakriti Suyate Sacharacharam. Only under his direction does Prakriti or material nature work. Similar information is given in Brahma Samhita. Yasyagya Pravati Samrita Kala Chakro Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Describing how material nature works, the Brahma Samhita says that the sun moves as desired by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, for Lord Ramachandra construct a bridge over the Indian Ocean with the help of monkey soldiers who threw great mountain peaks into the water is not at all wonderful. Semicolon. It is wonderful only in the sense that it has kept the name and fame of Lord Ramachandra eternally celebrated. Some of you may know that there's a pastime. I forget which personality speaks of this. There was a contemporary of the six Goswamis who was from South India. And he, as a young man, had an inspiration, a dream, to go to Vrindavan. And he made his residence at Radhakund for some time, along with some of the other Goswamis, while he made it a dedicated effort to assist them in discovering places of Krishna's pastimes. And he wrote a book about it, several hundred places. I can't remember his name right now. And later, in the latter part of his life, he made his place of bhajan or residence near Varsana and Unchagaon. And the name of that sadhu, does anyone recall the name? Not Bhogarba. Narayan Bhatt. Thank you. Narayan Bhatt. Narayan Bhatt. Do you remember the name of the book that he wrote about the places? It's several hundred places, and he has some mantras connected with each one, offering prana mantras for each one, and a little story. So what in relation to Govardhan, in Narayan Bhatt's writings, if my memory is correct, he speaks of a pastime from some scriptural reference source where Hanuman was bringing Govardhan. No, different day of Brahma, but Hanuman was bringing Govardhan, and he heard a voice from the sky, no need, the bridge is built. So he set Govardhan down, but Govardhan was upset. I wanted to have some service for Ram. And then he was told, you'll have some service in next time the Lord appears. So he was happy. Now there's other versions that describe how Govardhan became situated in Vrindavan. The Lord's devotees have a desire to serve. Certainly Hanuman, certainly Govardhan has a desire to serve. The best of all servants of Hari is Govardhan, desiring to serve in every possible way. And the gopis attest to that. The best of all servants of Hari is Govardhan Hill, serving this way, that way, the other way. They list different ways that Govardhan is in service to Krishna. I couldn't hear you.
It is Raja Bhakti Vilasa. It's
Yeah. Vraja Bhakti Vilas. Yes?
Yes.
Vraja Bhakti Vilas. That's the title of the book?
Yes.
Thank you. And if my memory serves me right, that's that reference of Hanuman bringing Govardhan towards the bridge. He was stopped by Akashvani, a voice from the sky. No need. Please come, Sister Ram. So he set Govardhan down. Narayan Bhatt. It's a little different going through Ram's pastimes, just verses like this, because it's kind of random, which is okay. It's not in Ramayana, the whole narration is very chronological. And the Puranas are not chronological like that. They kind of skip around. And when they skip around, it can get a little confusing because unless you're really familiar with the pastimes, and you can put this together with that, it can get confusing. I get confused how things flow. But as one becomes a little more familiar, especially given that Shukadeva Goswami, as a speaker of the Bhagavatam, is just speaking out of spontaneous love for Krishna. So it follows his mood more than it follows necessarily chronology. And that's a contrast. In the Itihasas, it's all very chronological. just a little sharing, and then we'll see if there break and see if there's some discussion. Something I've really been enjoying doing. The pandemic has its misery and it has its advantages. One of the advantages is on a regular basis, I'm interacting with the devotees from China, and every Monday morning, our time is Monday evening, their time, and there's a class on some theme. And then every other Thursday evening, Wednesday evening, which is Thursday, their morning, there's another class. So in the Thursday morning, their class, Wednesday evening, our time, I'm discussing Krishna's pastimes after leaving Vrindavan. We started within Vrindavan. Now he's chapter 59 of Canto 10. This is the not chronological message. So in chapter 59, Krishna kills Narakasura, and he marries the 16,100 queens. And prior to that, he marries 6 queens, and then the first 2 are Satyabhama and Jambavati. So 2 plus 6 makes 8, plus 16,100. That's his 16,108 queens. And that ends in chapter 59, where Narakasura is killed. And then that's 59, and it doesn't come up again until chapter 67, where Narakasura had a friend, and his friend was Dvidvida. I mentioned this at the very beginning. Dvidvida was one of Ram's associates in Ramayana. Mainda and Dvidvida were sons of the Ashwini Kumaras, and they were Vanaras who were assisting Sugriva, and they were present during the battle. They were there when they were talking about how many could they jump all the way to Lanka, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then Dvidvida made an offense to Lakshman. Dvidvida fell into bad association of Narakasura. When Narakasura was killed, he wanted to take revenge. So it's not discussed until chapter 67. Because there's a whole series of other events that took place in between. But it's told in that sequence, because focus goes before that to Balaram with Krishna in Dwaraka. Balaram is encouraging Krishna to go visit the residents of Vrindavan. Krishna doesn't go. He gives his reasons to Balaram why he doesn't go, but he encourages Balaram to go. So Balaram goes, and he carries messages from Krishna to different persons. Chapter 65. And while Balaram is in Vrindavan, there's another situation, Pondraka. Balaram's in Vrindavan. Balaram's not in Dwaraka. Pondraka gets, flattered by the king of Kashi and challenges Krishna, sends a messenger, and that whole scene takes place. Krishna goes and to Kashi and burns Kashi and kills Pondraka. And then Pondraka's son, that whole scene. So that's 65, 66. And then Shukadeva Goswami is reminded, hey, you're describing what happened with Balaram. You got distracted over here with the Pondraka story. What happened after that with Balaram? And that's where Vida because where Narakasura was killed. So Balaram is now going to deliver or eliminate Dvivida, who became bad by association with Narakasura. And that bad association, he was vulnerable to bad association because of offense to Lakshman. So beware of offense, because it can have consequences beyond our lifetime. Jiva Goswami describes this very clearly in Bhakti Sandarbha. Sins may carry over to the next lifetime, and offenses carry over to the next lifetime also. We had this stockpile of stuff due to, we may not remember, but some kind of offense. It's easy to overcome the consequences of offense or anarthas that are in the heart. And that was the cause of this elevated person, Dvivida, becoming bad. It started with his offense to Lakshman, just being proud of his capacity and somehow offending Lakshman. So I'm giving this as an example that the even in the 10th canto, the histories are not narrated chronologically. A lot of it has to do with the spontaneous mood of Shukadeva Goswami. And then Tamarsh Parikshit has to, at the beginning of this chapter, 67, he remember just 2 chapters ago, you were saying what Balaram did. And after he went back to Dwarka from visiting Vrindavan, what happened? Can you say what happened next? And so he narrates this story, Dvivida, Balaram killing Dvivida. And the way that all of that is, the way that the Bhagavatam is describing Ram's Leela here, to some degree there's chronology, but to a large degree it's kind of all over the place. And it's okay. It's a spontaneous Shukadev, inspiring our feelings of appreciation for Lord Ramacandra in his own way. And he's being encouraged to describe these things by Maharaj Parikshit. Very ecstatic. The sequence of the Bhagavatam's construction is from the very beginning to stimulate love for Krishna. And along the way, give so much understanding of so many, 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 many things. One devotee was asking me, why is there such a big deal about lineages of kings in the Bhagavatam? And it keeps coming up. It's a long list of lineages of kings. Why is that even there? And there's reason, and one of the reasons is the frame of the whole presentation of a Mahapurana is there's 10 topics, and it's the descendancy from Manus is one of the topics. So it's there because it's part of everything. And the Bhagavatam gives us everything. And in that, the essence of that everything is one thing. But the essence of everything finds its way into everything, including lineages of kings. We're not interested in just histories, but histories that are connected to the personality of Godhead. That's of interest to us. And therefore it's in the Bhagavatam. And it gives us, a big picture of creation, beginning in the middle and then the 12th canto, the closure, the end, the withdrawal of the universe, and the cycle of 4 ages and everything. Because understanding of Krishna includes everything. So how can you have a book that includes everything? Well, it's in sections or categories, at least categories of topics. And it's laid out in such a way. Stimulation of love for Krishna is right there, even in the first canto. The very special position of Vrindavan is there at several places in the first canto. Several of the persons speak of the glories of Vrindavan, right in the middle of everything else. And then slowly, the larger picture, and then we're taken to Vrindavan. And then Krishna out of Vrindavan and Krishna's pastimes. We don't hear so much in the Bhagavatam about, there's some, I mentioned one, when Balaram wants Krishna to go back with him to Vrindavan, and Krishna doesn't go, and he gives his reasons. And it's far more emphasized in the writing of our acharyas, far more emphasized. The feelings of Krishna while in Dwarka, feeling intense separation from the residents of Vrindavan. No, back to ninth canto. Ninth canto is giving us a picture of Krishna in one of his forms, and the form of Lord Ramacandra. And there's several chapters dedicated to the story, the life, and the example given by Lord Ramacandra. And it's awakening, it's meant to have us develop some attraction for the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead. I really liked the time that I spent last year before Ram Navami and just reading the entire Ramayana. I don't know what it was like for everybody else, but I know what it was like for me. It's just, I'd go to sleep and wake up in the morning thinking of pastimes of Lord Ramacandra, and then the next one and the next one. It was very, very nice. And this is a little different. It's not the full narration with all the details. It's just snippets. Just as there are passages within Ramayana that is just a really quick retelling of Ramayana in some number of verses, a retelling, and then another retelling, and then another. So stimulating the topics of Lord Ramacandra just in little short passages. A really nice one is when Hanuman is with Sita in the Ashok Grove, and he's being very thoughtful about how to not bring fear to Sita, but have Sita trust him. So he just decides to narrate. In a certain number of verses, he narrates Ramayana right there in the Ashok Grove. And Sita knows the thing. She's very happy to hear, in the midst of the Rakshasis and everything that's been going on there, to hear the story of herself and Ram. And Hanuman knows, and Hanuman's very, very good with words. And her heart becomes softened in the midst of that difficult situation. So the telling and retelling is a nice way to do it. So we'll just carry on reading verses through these chapters about Lord Ramacandra. Compliments of Shukadeva Goswami. See if there's any discussion. Are you going to take the microphone around?
Hare Krishna. It's not on. Hare Krishna.
Go ahead.
Hare Krishna.
Go ahead.
Guru Maharaj, in Ramayana, we do not hear about Narad Muni.
Yes, we do.
In the later part?
No, in the beginning part.
Or when he spoke the Mool Ramayana.
Yes.
Right? Okay. But itself in all the different kandas, he's not present in the pastime itself.
No, that's right.
So,
Why not? That's your question?
well, that, and also I was thinking, just like Narad Muni kind of instigated Kamsa or accelerated the birth of Lord Krishna, Mantra did something similar, where she, instigated or she accelerated the pastimes of Lord Ram.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there similarity? There is similarity in those, the acceleration of Lord Krishna's and Lord Ram's pastimes. So it was just a thought that came to my mind, that just like Narad Muni did.
Well, he did it deliberately. And Mantra didn't do it deliberately. She did it as an instrument of Ram. He inspired her to do what she did from within her heart. And he inspired Kaikeyi to do what she did from within her heart for purposes of his pastime. But it wasn't, neither of them was deliberate. And Narada was deliberate. He's very clever. It came at the right time, it said the right thing, got the right thing, you got it all done. And not only that, he went to Vrindavan and said what he said. He didn't, anyway, he played a role by the orchestration of Krishna consciously. That was the accelerating of the pastime, consciously. Does that help?
If like you were saying that he did it, but even that was prompted by Krishna, like
Well, of
as a
course.
super soul.
Yeah, but both, everyone who's not prompted by super soul, but he was doing what he was doing purposely for the Lord's pleasure and his pastimes. And that's not what Mantra or Kaikeyi were doing for the Lord's pleasure and pastimes. Something else altogether.
And is there a reason that Narad Muni is not in the actual pastimes with Lord Ram?
I'm trying to think if that's written or described anywhere by our acharyas, and I'm scanning and I'm not coming up with anything. Anybody in the room have an answer to that question? Aradhita, you have a phone? Could you send me a text message asking this question? And then I'll forward it to those that are, very knowledgeable in Ramayana, and maybe they'll have an answer to that question. In the back? Oh, okay, go ahead.
Mention about the chronology of the Ramayana. Prabhupada does mention somewhere that the chronological events are not very important when it relates to describing about the pastimes of the Lord.
Mhm.
So I can't think, was it in one of his purports, he does mention the same thing. It's not as important. It's not like a historical documentation of the Lord's pastime according to chronology. I do recall.
Well, my comment was specific to a distinction between itihasa and Purana. That was specific to that. With itihasa, it's primarily, there's two things. It's primarily a certain period of time and a certain, set of people, like Mahabharata and Ramayana are a certain set of people and a certain chronology of events in their lives. There's something to do with the way in which it's to be recited also. It's specifically to be sung, recited in that way. But yeah, the fact that the Puranas, Bhagavad Purana and others, are not chronological doesn't mean its importance is diminished. It's not so. Your point, this point is, it's not so important. Rather, the bhava of Shukadev Goswami narrating Srimad Bhagavatam, that's what's important. And he flows with an ecstatic mood, this way and that way. Okay, something in the back.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Am I audible, Maharaj? With in regards to Hanuman, you mentioned about Kim Purusha Varsha and that it is part of Jambudvip. Is Bharata Varsha also part of
Yes.
Jambudvip?
Yes.
So both Bharata Varsha and Kim Purusha Varsha are on the same plane.
They're part of Jambudvip. Hari Varsha is another. Varsha just means tract of land, and the tracts of land are separated by mountains. And that the central part, I mean, it's a little technical. If you want to hear the technical, we can go there. The central word is Elavati Varsha, is where Sumeru is. And that's one of the Varshas. And then there's 3, and there's 3, and there's 2, and there's 2. So 3 plus 3 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1. That's the Varshas, or tracts of land in Jambudvip, by name. And then, things go on there. The mountain range has a name, and so on.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Just as different devotees relate to the Lord in various rasas,
Yes.
and Madhurya is considered like the topmost Brihad Bhagavatamrita. I was wondering, I have observed, maybe incorrectly, that when it comes to the spiritual master also, there seems to be different, almost flavors of relationship. Some more serving, others more intimate associates, servants, personal servants, and so on. Even with Srila Prabhupada, somewhere his secretaries traveled with him, others maybe didn't see him but were as dedicated. So is there a difference, or is there a notion that one should aspire to be at a certain type of relationship with the spiritual master, similar to the various rasas with Krishna?
I'm not sure what you're asking. Are you asking, should one aspire for a certain type of relationship with the spiritual master, as we have varieties of relationships with Krishna?
Yes.
I'm a little stumped with this question, because commonly we don't think of aspiring for a particular relationship with a spiritual master as much as we think of or speak about being in service to the spiritual master's mission and mood. So trying to be tuned into the spiritual master's mission and mood, just, specifically thinking of Prabhupada and Prabhupada's disciples. Some persons, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was gifted in a certain way. And Vishnu Jan Swami was gifted in a certain way. And, that go down the list. And there are different persons that had very close relationships, very meaningful relationship with Prabhupada. Hari Sori had a specific relationship with Prabhupada. And his relationship with Prabhupada was different than other personal secretaries, without naming names and things. So it's not that so much that we aspire for a particular relationship, as much as to our capacity, trying to render some service that's meaningful to the mood and the mission of their spiritual master. And being very content with whatever that service is, trying to improve the quantity and quality, but trying to improve the quality primarily of that service. And that's where the thought should go, as opposed to aspiring for a particular relationship.
Thank you. I have one more question relating to Thursday's discussion we had about Bali Maharaj and Vamana Dev, and there was some discussion around that. So I was, while reading that pastime, I always thought that Bali Maharaj, being the type of glorious devotee that he was, when he was ruling the three worlds, why was there a need to reinstall the devas back? I mean, was usually when demons are in charge, like Hiranyakashipu, he changed the laws of almost like karma, and you do bad things, you do go to heaven. But Bali Maharaj doesn't seem to be someone who would misrule the three worlds. So why did Lord Vamanadev come to oust him and reinstall Indra as the king again?
He had some other service for him. And Aditi made her appeal. She did this very intense vrata under the advice of her husband, Kashyapa. So to support what he said, what she did, and reinstate, because that's the order. There's a king of heaven. It's Indra, whoever, there's a post, but that particular Indra was put in that post. So maintaining his order on the universe and some other service, and expressing the glories of Bali in a different way than he, rules the three worlds. And there was some other service for him. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, you talked about attachment. So the example of Dashrath attached to the Kekai, was it the attachment, like because he was the king of universe and he could have said, denied the Ram Vanvas. So was it because of the attachment? Can we say?
I couldn't follow your question.
was the Dashrath attached to the Kekai? That's why he accepted that Ram one was.
Can you understand what he's asking?
Is this because of Dasarath's attachment to Kaikeyi, he did not prevent Ram's banishment to the forest? Was it because of his attachment to Kaikeyi? Even though he had the power to deny Kaikeyi's request.
Ram. Dasarath. Why didn't Dasarath deny her request? That's your question?
Yeah, was it he was so much attached to the Kekai?
No. You know, he's a man of virtue, and he gave his word, and he's got to keep his word. Even if it meant his own death. Got to keep his word because he's a man of his word. And, you know, virtuous people keep the word at any cost. Is that?
Yeah, Maharaj. Yeah, but he was still very much attached to the Kekai, right? Out of three.
Well, you know, he lost it. When she asked what she asked, he was ready to chop her or disown her, or, you know. Yes, attached, but it broke. Because greater than his attachment for Kaikeyi was attachment to Ram. And what she did was bad. So his attachment broke. Which was maybe part of the pain. But, you know, the greater part of the pain was Ram has to be banished. 14 years. Going against everyone's sensibility, because he's the king and everyone wanted Ram as the king, and going against because he gave his word, because you want your son. So his attachment broke.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Different versions of Ramayana that we have, at least 100 that Your Holiness mentioned in the beginning, they come from different days of Lord Brahma. Each day of Lord Brahma is roughly about 4.3 billion years.
Yeah.
So how does this reach us through our the previous day of Lord Brahma? And then there is annihilation, so everything gets wiped off and stuff. So how does it reach us through our acharyas, or what is the channel that we get it?
Good question. Good question. The only thing that makes sense to me is it's preserved through sound, and how that sound is received after the partial annihilation. Because at the end of every day of Brahma, there's a partial annihilation. So, you know, the scriptures, whatever written form there may be at the end of every Kali Yuga, what happens to those written forms in the beginning of the next Yuga? And, you know, it's et cetera. So it's preserved. The simple answer exactly the methodology is another thing, but it's preserved through sound. And as rishis have the capacity to manifest sound, and then they manifest that sound, and then they speak that sound, and then the sound is accessible in subsequent days. How are all the Vedas manifest, for that matter, at the end of each, the partial annihilation? It's in sound. And they're available again the next day through sound.
The other question I have, as Lord Krishna has unmanifest pastimes going on in Vrindavan as we speak,
Mhm.
and the pure devotees experience that. Similarly, do we have any knowledge of Lord Ram's unmanifest pastimes going on in the region of Ayodhya, and his pure devotees are experiencing those pastimes?
Intuitively, it would make sense. But again, Aradhita, she's going to send me a text message, and maybe our scholars that know a lot about these things, because I don't know so much about Ramayana as they do. Maybe they'll have an answer.
And the third one I have, going back to Amal Nam Prabhu's first question, wouldn't that be his first question, the relationship between the disciple and the spiritual master in certain mood? Would that not depend on the mood of the disciple and the cultivation of that mood, that the relationship would evolve?
But that wasn't his question. Yes, it does, but that wasn't his question.
Okay.
His question specifically was, is it recommended to aspire for a certain kind of relationship? As we find, with the gopis have the highest, and et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you, Maharaj.
I was trying to comment here. We find among Indians, typically, they see the Lord Ramacandra as the epitome of best behavior. So they have a tendency to more approach Lord Ram as the Godhead. Whereas in Krishna Leela, we see
He does mischief.
not only mischief, like in the Mahabharata, in the war, Krishna told Yudhishthira to say a lie to Dronacharya. So a lot of them had a lot of issues with this. And Krishna broke his word, he won't carry a weapon. He lifted the wheel against Bhishma. So they have a lot of issue. Therefore, a lot of Indians who want to be very dharmic see Lord Ramacandra as the ideal God.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Let them go. Go for it. I understand what you're saying, and sensibilities are what they are. And then transcendence goes beyond those sensibilities. And some people aren't prepared to go beyond their sensibilities and understand, why the Yudhishthira was asked to tell a lie. There was a purpose. There was an external apparent purpose, but there's a higher purpose. And so forth. And some persons aren't ready to go there. That's okay. Be happy with Ram. Fantastic. And there's other persons, the individuals that I know that really like Ram. That's not the reason for really liking Ram. They just really like Ram. They just really like Ram. They're Krishna Bhaktas, but they're Ram Bhaktas at heart. And, within ISKCON. And they don't have issues with Krishna, this and that. But they just have an affinity for Ram.
One of your quotes on your quotation page helped me a lot with.
I have no idea what's on my quotation
I'm going to
page.
repeat that quotation. The something to this effect. Vrindavan or Goloka is the land of love,
not the law or above the law. So could that be an answer to what he's saying? Because love is higher than law, actually.
Yeah. In different ways of saying the same thing. Different ways of saying the same thing. But like, yeah. Different ways of saying the same thing. One of the explanations of Krishna saying to Yudhisthira, tell a lie, is Dharmam hi sakshat bhagavat pranitam. If Krishna says, don't tell a lie, you don't tell a lie. If Krishna says, tell a lie, tell a lie. And that's what establishes what Dharma is. If Krishna says fight, then you fight. Although not fighting is good, that's a good quality. But if Krishna wants it, even against your teacher, even against your grandfather, against, if Krishna wants it, that's the highest principle. Dharmam hi sakshat bhagavat pranitam. And some people don't like that. They want Dharma in their terms. Okay. And it's not like, that's the platform of Lord Ramacandra is Dharma on his terms. But, Dharma where there's it's for everyone and not, circumstance based. So many things. Kubja. So many things. Calling the gopis in the dead of night. Okay, we're done. You have something online. Okay, one.
It's from Srinidhi.
Aha. Hi, Krishna Srinidhi.
A little off topic. Why do we remain dependent at times, or at times grow even more dependent on others as we grow older?
Say it again without reading it. What's she asking?
I think why do we over time grow more dependent on certain people?
Why do we become more dependent on other people as we grow older?
Yes.
That's the question. Young people don't like to be dependent. I'm surprised you're asking that question. No, it can be different for different people, Srinidhi. Yeah, it may be, from your perspective, that's what happens. It may be that the sense of need becomes greater as one gets older, and therefore my set of needs have more resources that I need to get those expanded set of needs met. But, sometimes it works the other way. Sometimes it works the other way. Some persons, their life becomes simpler rather than more complex. Generally, life becomes more complex. And therefore, there's a greater set of needs, and therefore, there's a greater set of dependencies. But the Krishna conscious solution to this question, aside from, sociology, the Krishna conscious solution is dependence upon Krishna, take care of dependence upon, an expanded sense of dependence upon others. Where there's dependence upon Krishna, then needs, like, let's say a pure devotee doesn't need anything. They just desire something, and Krishna supplies it. Just somehow Krishna supplies it. I mean, I'm thinking because I've spent a lot of time with the six Goswamis topic. When Rupa Goswami wanted to have something to give to his brother on his birthday, there it was. Radharani brought it. When Raghunath Das wanted to expand Radha Kund, Super Soul, in the heart of a wealthy businessman that was going to build a temple in Badrinath, had a dream, and in the dream, it's take the money and give it to Raghunath. He didn't have to it was just his dependency was reduced by exclusive dependency upon Krishna. Put it succinctly. So if you want to become less dependent as you get older, become more dependent upon Krishna. And you'll find yourself less stretched out over so many dependencies. Okay. Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.